like a rhinestone cowboy. Dun, dun. Riding fast like a sparrow on a star-spangled horse in a rodeo. For my next number, thank you very much. Thank you, Pawtucket.
Hey, you're listening to 200 Proof Gospel, the podcast. I'm Craig D'Onofrio. With me, Pastor Troy New Year, Pastor Timothy Roth, and Pastor Mark Sell. Say hi, guys, all at once. 3, 2, 1.
Hi.
Hi.
Wow.
Oh, you know what? Oh, man. That was just ugly. So,
Are you
anyway, you guys... I'm having all sorts of software issues, but we're just running with it.
Okay, we're going to roll.
Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spreaker, Podbean. Listen to us Friday mornings, Pirate Christian Radio. 200proofgospel.com is the mothership. 200proofgospel at gmail.com is the Gmail, the email address that no one ever emails us.
Email us.
I received some pictures of feet not too long ago and a dog. From one of my parishioners. That was they were watching or listening to the podcast, rather. TuneIn Radio, we're there. I need to see if they ever picked us up on iHeartRadio or not. Get the app. We have an app for both iPods and Androids and iPhones and tablets and iPads and all sorts of eyes. The eyes have it.
Indeed,
Anyway.
they do.
Troy's looking at me funny. Here, play with my slinky.
Play
with my slinky. So, it's not making much noise.
No, it doesn't.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about baptism. And this is a good topic because there are a lot of crazy ideas about baptism, from our evangelical, fundagelical friends to our Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox friends to, of course, us Lutherans who have everything right. There's all sorts of important things there. What's up, Troy?
Nothing.
Oh, you had a look.
I'm just listening. I'm basking
in the glory that is Craig. So I think one of the places that we need to start, and I'll just kind of throw this out, since Timothy has been the most recent studier of languages, unless Mark is still keeping up on it. The Greek word baptizo, what can you tell us about that, Timothy?
It means to wash.
Very good. Are there other words in the Greek for washing?
Well, just since I already answered that, I'll let Mark answer that one.
Oh,
Oh, you had to go the other way around, didn't you?
I see how this is going.
Honestly, I don't remember.
Oh, wow. I
getting old. I'm going to be 60 in 3 months, so.
I thought I was lobbing a softball to you guys, and here we nipto. Nipto is another word for washing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I thought you were trying to get to a reference with baptism itself. So
No. Just simply that baptism is more than just a washing. There's a ceremonial aspect to the washing. Within the Jewish culture, there were baptisms. If you were to convert to Judaism as a Gentile, you would undergo a baptism. They would take you into a room and they would wash away your old pagan filth and your old pagan name, and you would come forth a cleansed Jew, or whatever a Jewish convert's called, because I can't think of what it is all of a sudden.
Proselyte.
Yeah, one of those. So, baptism is not anything new to Christianity, but then Christ has certainly done something a little different with this baptism. The scriptures talk about baptizing, that people would baptize their sofas and their washing vessels, their cooking vessels and other things like that. So, there's all
Okay,
that too.
you're making up sofas, right?
No. The scriptures talk about how they would wash their pots,
Mats.
pans, and sofas, is how it's kind of translated.
I see. I knew about pots and pans, but
Yeah.
so like a Davenport is
Well, I think Timothy's probably right. You would recline more on a cushion or a mat, but it got translated as sofa. I don't think that they had like lazy boys or anything.
So it got translated as wisdom?
No, not Sophia.
No, that's Sophia.
Oh, Sophia. Sorry.
So this takes us, one of the big questions that we're faced with all the time is the mode of baptism. How are we to baptize? Is it sprinkle, dunk, pour? What's the important thing here, guys? Let's start with Mark on this one.
Well, when it comes to water itself and applying the water, there is no prescribed way it must be done. Applying the water is the key, because what makes a baptism is simply water and the Word of God. So as Lutherans, we always say, hey, splash, dunk, fire hose, whatever. Just make sure you're applying the water with the Word of God. And historically, the church has made use of the formula to baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
There have been a couple parishioners that the fire hose sounds kind of attractive for.
I was just wondering how that would work. Would you just turn it on in the name of the Father, turn it off, turn it on, and in the Son, turn it off, and turn it on, Holy Spirit?
Right. It's tempting.
So it'd be 3 hoses, not just an ongoing stream.
Could be 3 hoses.
So as you knock them
3
down,
distinct hoses, but one hose.
You make them stand up after you knock them down every time with the hose? Is that kind of the deal?
Yes.
In the name of the Father, you blow them across the room. Okay, come back. In the name of the Son. I think we've just become blasphemous all of a sudden. Troy's getting
Pretty
nervous.
close.
Yeah.
Troy's getting nervous all of a sudden.
I am scooting back a little bit. I mean, when the bolt of lightning hits your recording equipment, I don't want to be near it. So.
That's okay. I'd like to get new gear, so it might give me a good excuse to put some stuff. The reason that I ask all of this is because it seems that these churches that put the least emphasis and the least amount of God working in baptism are the most concerned about the mode of baptism, how you are baptized. And our Baptist friends and evangelical friends will often tell us that Greek word baptizo means to immerse. You must immerse. That's what the word means, is to immerse. And, of course, Can
you say that one more time?
Immerse.
Thank you.
Immerse.
Yes.
Immerse.
I said only once.
But, it's interesting that they're so insistent on immersion when you say, well, what does it do? Well, it doesn't really do anything. It's just a sign of my obedience to God.
Well, but the immersion is a very clear sign. The dying of the old man and the rising of the new. And so that imagery there is a profound image. And so I could see where, some people would insist upon that particular image being used.
It's fine. I mean, we don't. I was immersed. I mean, it seemed to. Well, I know people have often questioned my baptism, but it it seems to have been efficacious. I mean, so far I haven't completely apostatized, unless you ask Christian News. But still, aside from that, that was simply based on the fact that I talked about decorating a Christmas tree in my boxer shorts, but apparently that's apostasy now. Anyway,
wow.
I'm confused.
Okay.
Are you joking or are you being serious?
No, I'm dead serious. I was roundly condemned to hell for another program that I do because I had mentioned that I decorated my Christmas tree in my boxers and dress socks.
And they actually thought this was worthy of writing.
They'll print pretty much anything. I'm pretty convinced of that. Yeah.
I really hoped you were joking.
No, I'm going to have to make up some stuff about you, Timothy, and just send it in. No, I'm sure they'll print it. It'd be good.
Well, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
You don't need to actually corroborate.
So
that it's
anyway,
true.
back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, can we go for an actual productive topic here then? So
You're
Other than Craig in his boxer shorts?
You're sitting in front of the wrong microphone if you want to do that. The mode of baptism, immersion, is certainly fine, but it isn't mandatory for immersion. And that's why I brought up the sofas, because I don't think that The word baptizo is associated with that verse. I'll look it up if you really want me to.
No, I found it. It's Mark 7,
Troy found it.
4.
Yeah. Will you read it?
Yeah, I will. Yes. In parentheses, for the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches.
Dining couches?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I said sofa. I was kind of the, like a sofa bed kind of thing that maybe you'd have the pull out and
That's okay.
drag it down to the lake and throw it in.
Well, why not?
So anyway, regardless, the couches, it indicates that there is a ritual washing because you have a nice, clean dining area, etc. But it isn't necessarily an immersion. Do we agree? Anyone want to argue that point?
Well, certainly. I mean, so if you are to wash cups and pots and copper vessels, you would almost certainly immerse them in your kitchen sink.
Those
as you
things, it
wash
makes
them.
sense,
Yes. Yeah, but if I if I wash my car, if I wash my hands, if I wash my dining couch, I'm not going to immerse it, but there will be water running over it. And, for that matter, too, as we're talking about the Pharisees not eating unless they wash, if I recall properly, the practice was that you had to use no less than 3 eggshells worth of water, holding your hands up so the water would run down.
Now, would that be a full eggshell or a half eggshell?
That is an excellent question that we can answer
And
another
what kind
time.
of eggs? Would these be chicken, goose, parakeet?
It'd be eggs from
Ostrich?
a clean animal. It'd be clean animal
Dinosaur eggs?
It could be, yeah. Probably not rattlesnake eggs. But my point is that the hands were
Fish eggs,
the hands
not
were
fish
not
eggs.
immersed, but they had running water. Dare I say, living water ran over them.
Ooh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just kind of ran to the mode of baptism first because, like I said, it seems that the churches that believe the least in what baptism does for you as far as God working are the most insistent on how you do it. And, there's an old story, I've told it 1,000 times, of a Lutheran pastor and a Baptist pastor sitting together. And the Lutheran pastor says, wait, let me get this straight. You have to immerse someone for baptism. What if you immerse them up to their knees? Will that work? No, that won't work. Well, what if you immerse them up to their waist in baptism? Will that work? No. Well, what if you immerse them up to their shoulders? Will that work? No. So what you're saying is the top of their head has to get wet. Yes. So we agree. And so, it's a lame joke, but it kind of illustrates the point that unless you're doing it right in this certain way, it's not being done. And we have to be careful when we start putting these kind of limits. Now, if that's the case, then you say, well, okay, Craig, then we should be able to baptize you in Jell-O or something like that.
Is Jell-O water?
There's water in Jell-O?
There's water in Jell-O, but
Yeah.
Jell-O's not water.
But there's water in Jell-O. I'm not advocating the baptism in
Okay.
Jell-O. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. All right, so because I will report you to CN at that point. So.
D'Onofrio says baptism in Jell-O is efficacious. Luther.
Okay, wait. I want to go on record as saying that if my church puts in a baptismal pool and fills it with Jell-O, I'm totally for that. It would be great.
You just want to be in the page. You know that you've arrived when Christian News says you're going to hell. That's all.
That baseball dunk tank only filled with Jell-O.
I threw this out before the show that Luther said in a case of emergency. Now, the emergency, not just because it's Tuesday, but in a case of emergency, beer will do because he understood that beer is mostly water. So
Wait. Luther didn't drink Coors Light.
I I really don't know what he drank. I don't think it was Guinness either.
You said it was mostly water.
Well, I'm not a beer drinker, so I'm going to have to.
All right.
I'm going to have to absent myself from this, from pontificating any further. So,
well, let me shift gears here. Is
Please,
baptism necessary for
do.
salvation?
oh no, now you went there.
Oh, all
So-
right. Probably want to get to the basics of baptism.
I'm going to let Troy jump on that one, or Timothy, one of the other two.
Oh my goodness. Timothy, you want to pick that one up?
Is baptism necessary for salvation?
Yes.
I would love to.
Please do.
Baptism is necessary for salvation, but it is not absolutely necessary.
He did it.
What?
He did it.
Craig, you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, because necessary is an absolute, is it not?
What?
Is not necessary an absolute in and of itself?
No.
No?
No.
It's necessary to have gasoline in my car for it to run. If there is no
It is
gasoline
absolutely
in my
necessary to have gasoline in your car for it to run.
Okay, so give me a non-absolute necessary.
Okay, so people always point to you Lutherans don't know what you're talking about when you say that baptism is necessary because the thief on the cross was obviously not baptized.
You don't know that.
True, but there's no indication that he was.
There's no indication that he wasn't either.
So I'm not sure
True.
who's arguing which point at this point.
However,
Okay, enough with. He's playing with his flarp in studio.
It's the
here.
leftover flarp from the God Whisperers. I'm
Oh
sorry.
my goodness! Thank you.
However, the point is not about whether he was or was not baptized. The reason he's brought up and the fact is because of the fact he repented from his sins and he
Okay.
asked Christ's forgiveness.
Oh wait.
Now, is it necessary for baptism? I'm not going to argue with Craig, but just go with the fact of, okay, he wasn't baptized, hypothetically. Now, if he wasn't baptized and he didn't die on the cross and was allowed to live, then the Spirit that brought him to faith would draw him to the waters of baptism as a necessary part of the overall Christian faith. Clear as mud?
Troy?
So far, I'm feeling kind of muddy about that. Can you keep going or?
Well, I mean, we acknowledge the fact that there are more than one means of grace. And
Yes.
What?
Yes, no, I'm totally with you now. Okay.
Yeah. So
There are multiple means of the same grace.
there are multiple means of the same grace.
Yes.
So
we do not have the means of
hypothetically,
we don't have the means of grace says, but the means of grace. It's all the grace of Jesus Christ, won for us on the cross.
it's all the grace of Jesus.
That comes
so
to
I
us through
have
multiple
a man
means.
walk into my church. Never heard this hypothetical. Have a man walk into my church. Never heard of Jesus before. He just decides to come in for the heck of it. And he sits down and he listens to a sermon. Comes back the next week, listens to another sermon. After he's here for
Uh-oh.
Oh,
We've got derezzing Skypeage here.
Uh-oh.
Okay, you're back.
you were attempting to defend that a guy who comes to your church will actually hear about Jesus. Is that right?
I would like to believe this is true, yes.
Troy,
Good. Anyway, he decides he wants to get baptized and join the church. Take him through catechism.
Yeah.
Okay, the day before he's baptized, he's in a car accident and dies.
yes?
Would we argue that because he did not actually get to baptism, he is damned?
Would we argue that?
Yeah.
I wouldn't, but
No,
Troy might.
I'm not arguing
No,
that.
Mark might.
No.
So in that case,
Mark
we would
there?
say
Mark's
that
still here?
baptism isn't absolutely necessary. However, the fact was that the Spirit, because he came to faith, was drawing him to the waters of baptism. He was desiring the gifts of God in baptism, not despising the gifts of God in baptism. So it is a necessary part of the faith.
So, Mark, are you there?
Yes, I sure am.
You got
Yeah.
anything from the confessions to share with us?
Yeah, actually. Article 9 of the Augsburg Confession says, concerning baptism, our churches teach that baptism is necessary for salvation and that God's grace is offered through baptism. Now, I think what Timothy's getting at, because he's not necessarily wrong, it's
Not
stating-
Necessary, absolutely necessary.
wrong.
right.
He's not
It's
absolutely
stating-
necessarily wrong.
Right. It's stating two truths that take place in the context of the church. So we would never say baptism is not necessary. It is necessary for salvation. And yet at the same time, those exceptions that do pop up in a sinful world, we will then always default to God's grace. And what he explained is the situation that becomes the exception to the rule, and you default to forgiveness because the guy confessed his faith and he was getting ready, even though he wasn't baptized.
So
Right, and
let's
then you go.
go ahead,
Oh.
Timothy. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, but then when you have someone who says, I'm a Christian and I believe, however, to prove whatever point, I'm not going to get baptized, well, then we have an issue because you are despising the gifts of God, which are part of the faith.
Okay, so I'm going to help Timothy out here just because we've been kind of busting on him here all along, and he's
Okay.
right. But let's look at.
Wait, what did you just say?
I said we're just busting on you, and you're never right. That's what I said.
That's-
Oh, and I'm never right. I thought you said I'm right.
Let's look at Mark 16 and the other Great Commission, starting verse 14. Afterward, he appeared to the 11 themselves as they were reclining at table, and he rebuked them for their unbelief and hardness of heart because they had not believed those who saw him after he had risen. And he said to them, go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. So he is saying that there is faith apart from baptism, but he is certainly putting a heavy emphasis on baptism also. So how do we know that we are saved? We can point to our baptism and say, there at that place, God made Craig a promise, and God does not lie, and he doesn't break his promises. So we can look to that promise given us through baptism by God and say, there's proof that God has saved me. But whoever does not believe will be condemned. So like Timothy said, that guy who's on his way to church and his car blows up or whatever, and he doesn't get baptized that day, he is not excluded here necessarily, because it says whoever does not believe will be condemned. So there are those who through no fault of their own have not been baptized. That does not exclude them from the kingdom of heaven. Discuss.
Well, I would like to say that sometimes these discussions end up at a point where it makes it sound like we think baptism is a nice extra.
No.
And,
No.
Yeah, and so we want to avoid that line of thinking altogether, right? And that line of discussion. As Mark already read from the Confessions, that baptism is necessary for salvation.
Yes.
And so I think the scripture reading you just had, where Jesus connects belief and baptism, is a very strong thing. That to be baptized is to believe, and to believe, not necessarily the opposite, but faith is given in baptism.
Yes.
Yes. And so if you believe and are baptized, you've said the same thing twice.
For the adult, always, belief and faith comes before baptism for the adult. Because we present ourselves for baptism because we believe. But we also baptize babies who cannot give their verbal assent. And we confess that God is the one working in baptism. And this is where we need to go with this, is who does the what in baptism? In my evangelical past, it was certainly just me showing the sign of my belief in my faith and my obedience to God. And so that's why you would present yourself for baptism, because I was the one, or the pastor was the one doing the what. But in the Lutheran Church, Mark, who does the what and why?
God does the work. Is that what you're after, you mean?
Yes.
God is the one who does the work.
Good.
The work.
So far, you're getting an A.
Yes, and thank you. And in baptism, that's why earlier we made the point that what is baptism? Simply put, it is the water and the word, the promises of God that will do what they say will do. And in that Mark 16 passage, what is nice about that is that the faith and the baptism go hand in hand. They're not disconnected. And I think where sometimes we get lost is we think that, well, somehow faith is one thing, baptism is another thing. But in this passage, the believing and being baptized they're just connected by the word and, so they go together.
Wait.
Especially with the verb shall be saved.
Isn't that what I just said?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. All right. Woo!
Okay, so here's go ahead.
I believe in redundancy.
I believe the Department of Redundancy Department. And Luther's Small Catechism actually references this Mark verse, Mark 16:16, and says, what benefits does baptism give? Well, it works forgiveness of sins, rescues from death and the devil, and gives eternal salvation to all who believe this, as the words and promises of God declare. And so, again, there is that strong connection between baptism and belief, that one gives the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It is baptism that is comprehended in faith that is salvific. And so we get into these chicken and egg questions. And does a belief come before baptism? Sometimes. Does a belief come with baptism? Yes. But, he who believes in is baptized. So the argument is this. God is the one doing the work in all of salvation and including baptism. And he's the one who provides the faith. And we are saved by grace through faith. And he's the one who provides the grace and the faith so that we might have salvation. So once again, when we ask who's doing the what, it's God who is doing the saving, the baptizing, the Lord's Suppering, the absolving, and so forth and so on. It's all God who is doing all of these things. We're actually almost out of time. Timothy.
Yes.
Any last thoughts? We're going to continue on this topic in the next God only knows how many programs. But,
good. Okay.
Yeah, we're just barely scratching the surface here. Any parting shots before we wrap it up for this episode?
Trust in your baptism.
Okay, that's a good one. I'll go with that. Mark?
Yeah, no, I think the baptismal grace that we have is something that creates the faith and sustains the faith throughout our entire life. And it's the beauty of the baptized life. And that's what translates you into everlasting life.
Troy.
Yeah, those are both really good. And I'll just add my point to that, is that a former seminary professor of mine would teach us to say, not that I was baptized, but I am baptized.
Ooh, good one. We'll have to pick that up next time, too. Yes, I am baptized. My last thing is, I don't have a baptismal certificate. I wish that I did, so that I could point to it and say, right there, on that day, at that time, in that place, I received a promise. And God ain't no liar. We'll catch you next time. Peace.